mean, how many times did Riley get touched?
You said what?
How many times did Riley get touched?
Come on! Let's go! Everyone said that Michigan would struggle this year, and well, they were pretty spot on about that. But that wasn't the only crazy game from this week. We're going to talk all about Notre Dame being upset, Alabama not playing great, and even Oregon maybe falling in the ranks again. This is the good, the bad, and the downright ugly from week 2 of college football. But first things first that we do have to talk about, and it's Texas being all the way back. Now, this was just the second meeting between these two college football blue bloods, the first coming back in the Rose Bowl in the 2004 season, again when another quarterback by the name of Vince Young absolutely terrorized them, similar to how Quinn Ewers absolutely terrorized Michigan on Saturday. I mean, Ewers pretty much had his way. He threw for 246 yards and 3 touchdowns. Like, the kid just looks incredible on the field. Texas has looked pretty much dominant all year. I know their first game wasn't against a great school, but overall they have looked great in their first 2 games. I mean, receiving wise, Gunnar Helm had 98 yards and a touchdown, and the Alabama transfer Isaiah Bond had 3 receptions for 51 yards. And again, they just looked absolutely dominant over Michigan in this game. And now as we look at Quinn Ewers just individually, he has led Texas to road wins in 2 of the toughest places to play in college football in consecutive seasons. Like, everybody forgets that last year they went into Alabama and beat Alabama on the road. Not many people can say that, which also meant that Texas became the first school to beat Michigan and Alabama on the road in consecutive seasons since Notre Dame pulled off that feat in the 1979 and 1980 seasons with different quarterbacks, according to Sports Radar. I mean, this is Texas's first season in the SEC, and it looks as if they can contend for the conference and possibly even the national championship. Like, right now, they look like probably the best team in the nation. I mean, Steve Sarkisian in the post-game interview, he said that this one game isn't going to define our season, but I think it would serve as a pretty good barometer of the type of team we could be. And again, I think they can contend for that national title. I mean, they look completely dominant against Michigan. I mean, early on in this game, it did look like Michigan was going to hang around. It was 7-3, but then again, Quinn Ewers hit this touchdown right here, and again just broke the game completely open. And coming out of halftime, it ended up being 24-3 with about 11 minutes left in the third quarter, and was pretty much just Texas from beginning to end. Like, they never looked not in control in this game. And I mean, on the Michigan side of the ball, we really have to start looking at how maybe losing JJ McCarthy along with those 13 other players from the offensive and defensive side of the ball, along with Jim Harbaugh, is really going to affect Michigan this year. I mean, throughout the game, you can tell Michigan isn't rotating their D-line like they did last year, maybe because of depth or just because they don't have those players that are as good as what they had last year, and is really affecting the defensive side of the ball. On top of that too, I mean, they have this 2-quarterback system with the Ojulari kid, and I personally, for me, I just hate a 2-quarterback system. It just doesn't work. Like, you're pretty much telegraphing you're going to run the ball. And then on top of that too, Warren just doesn't look like a great quarterback. I'm glad that he's in and is okay, but he's really just not that quarterback that's going to take them over the top. I mean, he was 22 of 33 for 204 yards to go along with a touchdown when the game was out of reach, but he did have 2 interceptions at the same time. I mean, there were some bright spots though. I mean, the preseason All-American tight end Colston Loveland had 8 receptions for 70 yards. Then again, he did have an unforced fumble that did allow for Texas to easily score and put the game even more out of reach. I mean, another thing for me too is this kind of makes me wonder, is this why maybe Jim Harbaugh was trying to leave, along with the allegations that they already had with Connor Stallions to deal with? It kind of makes me wonder if Jim Harbaugh kind of saw how bad they were going to be after they lose all of those people in the draft, is that he pretty much didn't want to have to deal with all of the losing that was going to happen this season. I mean, they still do have guys like Donovan Edwards, Will Johnson, Mason Graham, and guys like that that are still going to be first-round picks in this year's draft most likely. But again, I don't think those guys are just good enough to carry this Michigan roster to what they want to be. I mean, they want to be national title contenders, but I just don't see that happening this year, especially with the roster they have around Davis Warren and just the entire team as a unit. I think that they really are going to struggle this year being inside of the Big Ten. Somehow they are listed as like 9.5-point favorites somewhere that I saw against USC, but that just doesn't make sense to me. They just look really sloppy. They can't get the run game going, and when they play teams that are as good as Texas, such as USC, Ohio State, I just don't think they're going to be able to keep up with those true blue bloods this year, and are possibly even going to be unranked by the end of the year. I mean, I predicted them in my week 1 video to go about 7-5, so I totally can see that still happening just because of all the talent they did lose last year in the draft. But now the next game we have to talk about is the number 5 Notre Dame Fighting Irish taking on the Northern Illinois Huskies. I think I'm going to be the first one to say this, that Riley Leonard is not a good quarterback. Like, yes, last week they did win the game, but I don't think it truly was because of him playing well. He did play play good, but he was more so overshadowed, I think, because of just how bad Connor Wegman was, that it made him look even better. And now, yes, last week in my video, I did say that I could see them going undefeated for the rest of the season. But now after this loss, they have a 23% chance to make the playoff. They literally don't play another good team besides USC, I think, until the last week of the season. Like, this loss is going to absolutely destroy their playoff chances now. Like, I mean, as we jump into the game, Northern Illinois just stayed around this entire game. They never left. I mean, Ontario Brown had 20 attempts on 99 yards rushing, and then Gavin Williams had 17 attempts for 59 yards rushing. I mean, the Huskies running backs were just running all over this defense. I mean, Ethan Hampton didn't have a crazy good game, but he didn't need to. I mean, they were running the ball so well that he was able to go 10 of 19 for 198 yards and 1 touchdown. I mean, like I said, they were just feeding their running backs. Their running back had 2 receptions for 126 yards, one of them being an 83-yard play right here that you're seeing. Like, this kid just completely kept them in the game and allowed them to just pretty much control the clock. On top of that too, again, it's the secondary of this Notre Dame team that really is going to keep them in games and kind of lock teams up. And I think Northern Illinois knew that, and they ran the ball way more and way better than Notre Dame even predicted. I mean, coming into this game too, MAC opponents were 0-51 against ranked opponents. And then on top of that too, this is Northern Illinois' just 6th ranked win versus a ranked opponent since 2015. Before this, they were 0-14 against top 10 opponents. Like, I mean, going into South Bend and winning is just absolute downright crazy. And we even got this moment right after the game was over of him just completely dropping to his knees and just crying because he couldn't believe that they had pulled off the upset. And I'm gonna let him just talk about what happened during the game.
They listened to what I said. I told them all week, we don't need luck. We just got to be our best. And they was their best today, and we was able to get it done.
I mean, it is completely crazy to see Northern Illinois in week 2 go into South Bend and upset Notre Dame, a game that nobody had picked. I believe that Notre Dame was more than 33-point favorites, if not more. I could be wrong. So for them to completely have this sort of collapse is just downright unheard of. Again, I still fully expect Notre Dame to bounce back. They need to win this game. Their coach even said this after the game.
You go from the highest of highs to the lowest of lows in a tale of 2 weeks, but, you know, we got to own this thing as coaches and players. We got to own it. We got to fix it. I've been here. We've been here before, right? We've been here before. Now it's time to get it fixed.
But again, I think it's just really going to come down to Riley Leonard, and he needs to step it up. And if he's not going to, then this team is really going to struggle against better defenses. All right, now after those 2 games, we're going to jump into our order now of 1 through 25 of these teams. And pretty simple, Georgia ran through Tennessee Tech, Ohio State ran through Western Michigan. But then we jumped to number 4, Alabama, actually struggling to University of Southern Florida. I mean, coming into this game, USF was 33.5-point dogs to Alabama. On top of that, too, Alabama was honoring Nick Saban at halftime. So everybody pretty much thought this was going to be a pure domination from Alabama, and it was the complete opposite of that. Like, yes, the final score was 42-16, but that doesn't do justice to how close this game actually was until the 4th quarter. Like, for the first 3 quarters, Alabama was really struggling to stop USF running the ball. I mean, their defensive line gave up over 200 yards rushing. South Florida didn't even pass the ball for almost 100 yards. They literally passed for 103 yards in this game with 400 yards of total offense, 11 of them being rushing plays. I mean, hands down, this had to be the sloppiest game of the weekend. I mean, in total, there were 24 penalties called. Alone on Alabama, there was 13 for 120 yards. It was crazy. I mean, their right tackle, I believe number 75 on Alabama, 4 holding penalties of his own. I mean, Jalen Milroe, he did keep his composure for most of the game, if not the entire game, but the rest of the team was just extremely frustrated with the production of the offensive unit. I mean, going into the 3rd quarter, they were 3 of 11 in the red zone, and I honestly don't know why Bama wasn't letting Jalen Milroe rush the ball more once they got into the red zone. Like, he was far and above the best player on the field. Like, make sure he's getting the ball. They didn't do that though. Again, it just looked really sloppy overall. I mean, they had 3 fumbles lost in 1 half and 1 even in the red zone when they were about 3 yards. They put Jalen Milroe under center, which again, I don't understand. Put him in shotgun, let him just QB blast up the right side behind a pulling guard or behind the running back and let him score. But then finally worries were put to rest once Ryan Williams, the 17-year-old, put the game away late in the 4th quarter on a hitch route he took to the house. I mean, this kid is 17 years old and a freshman, but to be able to have that speed at such a young age is incredible. incredible. I think he's going to be something once we do see him turn into just a beast when he's a junior or even a sophomore next year. The next game we're going to talk about is number 6 Ole Miss versus Middle Tennessee. I mean, hands down, Ole Miss just handled business. Jackson Dart might be the best player in the NCAA this year. He might win the Heisman because of not only because of just his athletic ability he has, but also because of Lane Kiffin being able to talk to him up until 15 seconds. Like, you can best believe that Lane Kiffin is probably telling him where to go with the ball once he sees the defensive coverage or the defensive alignment when they break the huddle. Like, I mean, besides Texas, Ole Miss probably has to be the second best team in the nation right now. Like, they are dominating everybody. I'd even put Ole Miss maybe ahead of Georgia, but we got to see once they start playing each other inside of that SEC conference. Now, the next big scare of the weekend came for number 7 Oregon versus Boise State. I mean, last week, Oregon already was struggling with Idaho, and because of that, they fell in the ranks despite winning that game last week. And honestly, I could see that happening possibly even again. I mean, they're not going to fall 4 ranks like they did last week, but I could see them easily falling another 3 or even just 2, just to like 8 or 9. I mean, their defense was flying around, but they pretty much have no run defense. I don't know if anybody's going to have run defense though for Ashton Genty. Like, this kid, without a doubt, is a legit first round pick. And on top of that too, he's probably a Heisman candidate right now. I mean, last night the kid had 25 rushing attempts for 192 yards and 3 touchdowns. Like, that's following up the performance he had last week with 267 yards and 6 touchdowns. This kid is just dominant right now. And this may even be a hot take, but if Boise State maybe had some more playmakers on the offensive side of the ball, maybe even a quarterback and just more defensive playmakers too, they would be a top 10 team in the nation without a doubt. Like, they're just so good, but they just don't have enough talent to compete with these Oregons or just bigger schools that are gonna have that premium talent on both sides of the ball. I mean, overall though, Dylan Gabriel was just dotting all night. I mean, he had a dot right here to Evan Stewart for his 2nd touchdown of the night. Like, this offensive unit for Oregon is legit. They are good, but it's just that this offensive line is having really big issues with protecting Dylan Gabriel. Like, I saw this stat that Oregon just can't protect Gabriel. He was sacked 4 times in the first half of last night's game. And on top of that, last year alone, they gave up 5 total sacks. This year, they've already given up 7. So I don't know maybe if it's Dylan Gabriel just holding the ball more than Bo Nix did last year or what the problem is, but they need to figure it out because this kid can't keep taking these type of hits week in and week out. I mean, in the first half, it was just completely back and forth. Genty was just running up and down the field, and then Gabriel would just get the ball and throw a touchdown pass to Evan Stewart. Maddox Madison did have a touchdown to put them up early, and then right before half, they did get a fumble back to put the game at 20-14 going into half. But then in the second half, they kind of did what I think a lot of teams are going to do once they play Boise State is, like, their quarterback, he's not great. He went 17 of 40 for I think like 148 yards and a touchdown. So he's not great. So once they kind of figure out that Genty is the only guy capable on this offense, yes, the play action will still work. Most teams are just going to start loading up the box. I mean, that's exactly what Oregon did. Is the second half, they pretty much loaded the box up and made Maddox pass the ball. Like, I mean, early in the third quarter, we had Dylan Gabriel complete a pass to Holden, who then took it 41 yards for the touchdown. And then on top of that too, Boise State then had to punt the ball, and Tez Johnson returned the punt 38 yards to put Oregon finally in the lead 27-20 going into the fourth quarter. And again, despite them still loading the box, Boise State continued to pound the rock, and Genty scored 30-yard touchdown, tying the game. But then finally, Oregon did get the ball back and would kick a field goal to win the game. All in all though, I think Oregon really does need to figure out what they're going to do with that offensive line. They need to protect him if they want to be successful this year. I mean, they're playing in a Big Ten that's going to have good edge rushers, so they have to make sure he's protected if they want to continue to be successful. Overall though, I still fully expect Oregon to be inside of the playoff. They should be a 4 or 5 seed despite any losses they take this season. I mean, if they do take a loss, it'll be like a really good ranked opponent inside of the Big Ten, I believe. Pretty much there though, from games 9 through 21, they were all blowouts until we got to Iowa and Iowa State. I mean, this had to be just one of the best games so far this year. Like, it always is. Like, I mean, it was just a hard-nosed game from start to finish. Iowa State's quarterback played fantastic throughout the game to keep them in this game too. In the second half alone, Iowa was outscored 20-6, and then for that freshman kicker to go and knock a 55-yard field goal with ease for the game was insane. I mean, the coach even said he was hitting 64-yarders in their preseason spring games. I mean, the kick looked like it even had more distance if he needed to kick it further, but overall, the game was just awesome. And then we have number 22 Louisville at Jackson State. Louisville handled business, and then we have Georgia Tech getting upset by Syracuse. The only takeaway I have from this is that it's cool to see Kyle McCord, the Ohio State transfer. He looked really good for Syracuse, taking them and helping them beat Georgia Tech in Georgia Tech. It looked really good. He's as good as advertised and is going to help the Syracuse win a lot of games this year, I believe. But then we have the absolute downright ugliest game of this weekend for all the wrong reasons because of what happened to Colorado when they went into Nebraska. So for starters with this game, I think it's safe to say that Dylan Raiola wants to be Patrick Mahomes. I mean, it's kind of not weird at this point. I mean, we all want to have that person we idolize, but he's kind of taken it to a new level. But besides that, this is his second start compared to Shedeur Sanders' 39th start. Like, this is completely two ends of the spectrum right now when we have a pure vet in Shedeur Sanders with his 39th start and Dylan Raiola, the freshman, with his second start. Like, I mean, even before the game, we saw Dylan Raiola do this, which is exactly what Patrick Mahomes does before every single game. So this kid definitely wants to be Patrick Mahomes. And I mean, on their first drive, Nebraska looked great. I mean, they pretty much had their way with Colorado running the ball, and then on top of that, passing the ball as well. I mean, on that first drive, Dante DeWall had a touchdown to put them ahead 7-0. And again, Nebraska just kind of had their way. On the first drive, Sanders was sacked twice and stopped on fourth down. Like, this O-line for everybody that they brought in and was being hyped up about has looked terrible through 2 games. Like, they cannot protect Shedeur Sanders at all. And then on the ensuing drive after that touchdown run, Shedeur Sanders threw a pick 6 at like the 6-yard line, and then the Huskers were out 14-0. Like, I mean, overall, they did not look good at all throughout this entire game. I mean, at one point going into halftime, it was 28-0. It just didn't look good. Finally, Colorado got a field goal in the third quarter, but I mean, like, they didn't even get their first down till 2 minutes into the second quarter. Like, this offense and just this team in general is going to really struggle against these bigger teams. I think Colorado doesn't realize that they are literally going to have a target on their back all year long because of how much trash talking they do, and then not being able to back it up. Like, they're still going to only win like 5 games this year despite all of this trash talk. And I think another thing too is just a lot of teams are figuring out when to double Travis Hunter once they get closer to the red zone. They want to throw fades to him, out routes, things like that. We even saw in the second quarter him get really frustrated when a ball was overthrown to him. Like, I think he's just going to get really frustrated once he doesn't have the ball thrown to him on offense. And now I think what our key takeaways are from this game too is just that when we look at the team stats, Nebraska had 149 yards rushing and only 185 yards passing, just proving how bad this defensive line has been this year. Even in the game against Northern Dakota, they really struggled rushing the ball, and they even brought in Warren Sapp to be the defensive line head coach and kind of try to revamp this defensive line, which hasn't worked so far. Like, for everything that Colorado has talked big about, they really haven't been able to back it up this year, from their offensive line to now their defensive line just kind of not even being able to stop the rushing attack. I think it's gonna be really scary for Colorado this year, and a lot of people are still buying into the hype even though they're not that great of a team. They just know how to put on a great show. But I want to know what you guys think. What were your key takeaways from week 2 of college football? Who do you think is going to be in the 12-team playoff? Who are the top 5 best teams in college football right now? If you have been watching, let me know what you guys think of who the best teams are. And as always, if you guys have not, make sure that you join my Discord where we are doing all of our college football and all of our NFL talk over there. And if you guys have not, make sure you guys like, comment, and subscribe. Share the video with somebody that does enjoy football. And as always, I will catch you guys in the next one.